Max Entei is making its Pokemon Go debut during its own Max Battle weekend, and in this video I will be going through the best counters and strategies to help you take it down easily, and I'll go through some reasons why this Pokemon is actually worth battling. So the event takes place from April 26th at 6 AM until the 27th at 9 PM local time, but what exactly does this event have to offer? Well, for the bonuses, Max Entei will be appearing more frequently at power spots, the max particle collection limit will increase to 1600, there'll be quarter walking distance to receive max particles, power spots will refresh more frequently, you'll get 8 times max particles from power spots. There are more that will be active from the 21st of April at 6 AM until the 27th at 9 PM local time. During this time, you will have 3/4 max particle cost for unlocking and powering up max moves. So this will be a pretty useful time to be collecting max particles and using them to unlock and power up max moves on Pokemon that will be useful against Max Entei. And we will be getting into which Pokemon will be best for this later on in the video. You will get a free timed research starting from April 21st at 6 AM local time that will get you an encounter with Max Sobble, some Sobble candy, max particles, and more to help you take on Max Entei. So how can you defeat Max Entei with the least amount of trainers possible? Well, there are a couple of really useful strategies you can use, but first you need to know about the roles tanks, healers, and attackers, and what makes a Pokemon good in these roles. So briefly, a tank is a Pokemon that has high defenses and a typing that resists most of the attacks the Max Battle Boss can do, so overall it can take less damage. It can also be a Max Guard user, which gives it more health in the form of shields, and the ability to taunt the Max Battle Boss to attack it more than it attacks others in the party. This is generally really useful when working as a team, so you can take the heat off of the attackers, which usually have stats more weighted in attack, so they are more frail and may be defeated more quickly if hit often. Good tanks do often have low animation fast attacks, moves like Water Gun and Bite for example, that have a 0.5 second animation time, allowing them to charge up the max meter more quickly than other moves. This is particularly helpful for strategies when everyone is using attackers or when you are soloing, because you can use the tank to build the max meter fast, and then during the Dynamax phase you can swap into your attacker and use its max attacks, and then swap back into the tank and repeat. Now healers can be pretty similar to tanks in terms of you want them to take less damage and resist attacks, etc. But as they're going to be using Max Spirit to heal the 4 trainer party, you do want them to have a high stamina stat as well. This is because Max Spirit heals an amount that is a percentage of the user's HP. So the higher the Max Spirit user's HP, the bigger the heal will be. This means Pokemon like Max Blissey are very good for this role with a very high HP stat. And lastly, for attackers, you do want Pokemon that have a type advantage over the Max Battle Boss, and you want as high damage as possible with strong super effective moves and a high attack stat. Their goal is to do as much damage as possible. And a quick bonus tip for further preparing against Max Battle Bosses is that they can actually do 2 types of attacks, which will be chosen from the Pokemon's charged attack move pool. One attack is a large attack that hits all Pokemon, and this one can't be dodged, and the second is a direct attack on a specific Pokemon that can be dodged by keeping an eye on the attack feed and the 3 lines that appear above your Pokemon. Worth noting though that dodging has actually been broken in game for a little while now, so hopefully that is fixed before these raids go live. However, if not, you will have to try and set up your team as best as you can for taking the charge attacks from Entei, because some of these charge attacks that Entei can do will be one-shotting your Pokemon. But if you do encounter an attack combination that is particularly tricky to deal with, you can always back out of the lobby and re-lobby to re-roll the moveset. This is helpful if you have certain counters that work better against certain movesets, or if Entei happens to be using its stronger moves that are one-shotting your Pokemon. Now back to the question of strategy. So you can take on this battle with up to 4 people, and it is recommended for 5 and 6 star max battles that you split your team into a tank focused trainer, a healing focused trainer, and 2 attacking focused trainers. However, unless you have 4 people with good communication, I would recommend a different strategy, where all players use tanks to start off to fill up the max meter, then swap into attackers or healers during the Dynamax window, and then swap back into the tanks and repeat. With whichever strategy you find to be best in your specific situation, it does beg the question of what are the best counters for Max Entei. So Max Entei can be shiny from these battles, and the 100% IV you're looking for is 1984. It is a fire type, therefore it does have a weakness to ground, rock, and water type attacks, and it will use 2 of the following moves during battle: Flamethrower, Iron Head, Flame Charge, Fire Blast, Overheat, and Scorching Sands. For tanks and healers, I would recommend Max Blissey with Pound. It isn't resisting any of Entei's moves, but it is still strong enough of a tank to take hits from Max Entei and stay alive. Alternatively, for a tank, you could use G-Max Blastoise with Water Gun because it can resist 5 out of 6 of Entei's moves. A good strategy is to start off with Max Blissey and survive long long enough so you can swap into G-Max Blastoise in the Dynamax phase to use Max Guard level 3. Because G-Max Blastoise will take less damage than Max Blissey, but with the higher HP of Blissey, it means it's more likely to survive the first hit and reach the Dynamax phase. You can then use Blastoise again to build the meter back up and then either switch back to Blissey for healing or into an attacker for damage. And that brings me to the best attackers. The best attackers will be G-Max Kingler, but if you don't have that, then some options will be Max Inteleon with Water Gun, Max Excadrill with Mud Slap, Max Kingler with Bubble, G-Max Blastoise with Water Gun, and Max Blastoise with Water Gun. Worth noting that in max battles leading up to the Max Entei weekend, from the 21st at 6 AM, Max Squirtle, Krabby, Chansey, and Sobble will all be available, and all of these can be useful Pokemon for Max Entei battles, so if you haven't got anything already, then you can use these Pokemon to prepare. And that leads us to the question of how many trainers will it take to beat this max battle? Well, it is hard to say for sure until the battles go live, and if dodging does stay broken, it will affect it. But based on previous Max Raikou battles, I would imagine these raids will be doable with 2 trainers, but I would recommend 3 or 4 trainers if possible. Worth noting as well, whilst expensive to purchase, Max Mushrooms do double your damage output, so it is a great item to use if you don't have many people to do these battles with. And with Max Blissey, G-Max Blastoise, and G-Max Kingler being some of the best counters for Max Entei, you are generally going to need a lot of candy to power them up, and to unlock and level up their max moves. So it's well worth leaving multiple of them at different power spots often to try and gain some passive candy. But if you can't manage to get as much candy as you need to level up these Pokemon and their max moves, there is a certain way you can use the candy you've got to make sure you get the most out of this resource, because it can be tricky to decide whether to power up the Pokemon or the max moves first. So the best order of importance is to fully evolve the Pokemon first if you can, then power up to level 30, because after this the amount of resources to level up becomes a lot more steep and a lot less worth it. Once at level 30 you can then begin powering up your max moves, and after that you should power up to level 40 and 50. Doing it this way will get the most out of the resources you have. But how can you even tell your Pokemon is at level 30? Well, the best way to tell is the Stardust cost for powering up. If you get to the point where the next Stardust cost requires 5,000 Stardust, that is level 29. So if you power up 2 more times, it will reach level 30. Then you can focus on powering up your max moves. But are these Max Entei battles even worth doing? Well, unfortunately, Entei will be outclassed by other fire type attackers like Max Darmanitan, Max Moltres, and G-Max Charizard. But it isn't a bad option if you don't have those. It is also useful to have a Max Entei so you can leave it at power spots to passively gain candy, so you don't have to raid it as much when it returns to raids. And this candy will be useful for powering up Shadow Entei if you have one, because it is the 8th best fire type raid attacker with Fire Spin and Overheat. And with these battles being in person only, if you do decide to do them, then there are some ways you can increase your chances of finding people to do them with. Firstly, just going to a high population place like a city centre at the time of the battle starting could get you a group without much effort. However, you are most likely going to need to coordinate with other trainers to group with them. For this, you could use local Discords, Facebook groups, or Niantic Campfire meetups to find other local trainers. And if you go to a meetup that is being specifically held by a Pokemon Go community ambassador, then there are actually some free items you can get from doing this. So to do this, you need to head to the Niantic Campfire app and check the map of your local area to see if there are any meetups that are specifically being held by a community ambassador. Then when you get to the meetup, you can check in via the Niantic Campfire app and you will receive a special research. These do differ depending on the type of event you are attending, and for a max battle event in particular, you will be rewarded with 5,000 XP for winning 2 max battles, 2,000 Stardust for powering up a Pokemon 10 times, 5 Great Balls for catching a max Pokemon, and you'll get 800 max particles for completing all of these tasks. With that said though, if you do want to know more about the Sweet Discoveries event that is going on at the same time as this event, then I recommend checking out this video on the screen now, and I'll catch you in the next one.